To so welcome to another edition of the Impact Sessions podcast with me, Nick Bramley. As ever, we've got a great guest for us to explore their expertise, and I thought I'd invite this guy along because I've known him for a long time, and he's actually a master photographer, a guy called Paul Cooper, who runs a business called Bailey Cooper Photography in York. He's a very talented guy with a camera. But my feed is full of AI, and it's AI images, AI this, AI that. And I was just intrigued to see what that means for the future of the camera. So we call this episode The Camera versus AI, Who Wins? So to explore the who wins conundrum, welcome to Paul Cooper from Bailey Cooper. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Nick. Thank you for having me here. I thought you were talking about somebody else at the beginning there because you were talking about talent and stuff. I thought he must have got somebody else to replace me.
Last minute, I nearly did, but no, absolutely. I've known you for a long, long time. I've seen, the award-winning stuff that you do, and the fact that you are constantly creating fantastic photography imagery for business and for sort of personal use. And I'm just intrigued as to see, what that actually means now with the advent of someone clicking a button, asking AI to throw an image at them, and what that does. So let's start a little bit by exploring a bit about Paul. So we've known each other since, and I'm sorry to make you feel old, since the late 90s, mate. But you've also got a glint in your eye and a sharp sense of humour. So how much trouble am I in trying to record this podcast in one take?
Well, I think it might actually be longer than that. It feels like we were cavemen together, Nick. That's how long I feel I've known you. Trying to do this in one take, ask me that question at the end, maybe. What I've got to do whenever I'm recording any kind of media is I've got to not swear. So I will apologize in advance. If you've got a beeper machine, we'll be fine. But
Well,
I'll try my best.
I don't possess a beeper machine, and I'm not very good at editing, so please try your best, mate.
Okay.
That's okay. So let's explore photography and your career, really. I'm always intrigued when someone has what I would call a job that comes out of potentially what was an interest or a hobby. How did you first get interested in photography?
Interesting on that because I had zero interest in photography up to the age of 18. And at the age of 18, my parents bought me a camera for my birthday. Hadn't asked for one, but they bought me this camera. They thought he deserves one now. So this little compact Ricoh camera. And I was just hooked. This is in the days of film, obviously, because I'm that old. So I got into developing my own films and just going out and shooting anything. And I was just absolutely hooked. So much so that I then actually enrolled at night school and did an O level in photography. That's where it started.
I'm going to stop you there. For those who don't know, an O level was a very early precursor to GCSE. God, we showed our age. It's only question two. To GCSEs, but it's interesting that your mum and dad bought you a camera with absolutely zero request for one. I think they were trying to get you out of the house, Paul. But
Yeah.
maybe if you've explored that at some point since. So when you were studying it and you were getting into, just going out and shooting stuff, what was drawing your eye? What was the things that were of interest to Paul Cooper in the early days?
Well, my teacher at night school was a chap in York called Jim Brownbill, who was the chief photographer at the Evening Press, and he actually lived just over the road from us when I lived with my parents, um, and he was really great because he gave me this thirst for going out and shooting pictures of people, actually news stories. And what I actually did was I started shooting pictures. I'd go into town on a Saturday and I'd shoot pictures of whatever thing, because there was always something happening in York. There'd
Yeah.
be, I don't know, fire eaters in Parliament Street or something happened all the time. And so I would take pictures, rush back home, print them in my dark room, which was my parents' loft, uh, and then rush down to, do you remember the Advertiser newspaper in York? It was a free weekly newspaper.
I do.
And I would go down to their offices and post the pictures through the door, and they started publishing them and paying me. I
That'll
thought, hang
be
on a minute, this is too good to be true. I love doing it, and they pay me.
that'll have been a bit of a shock because I presume you weren't doing it initially for the pay, just
No, I wasn't.
for the recognition of,
Yep.
a bit of talent. So you were drawn to people and you were drawn to scenes of, I guess, energy and activity. When did you realise? Was that the first time you realised you had a talent for it when they started getting published and paid? Then.
Yeah, I suppose it was really. I thought, well, if it's worth paying for, maybe it is, maybe I've got something, maybe I can do this. And then I got into the world of work, and I actually worked in IT. So again, this is back in 1981, two.
Yeah.
This is when the first IBM microcomputer came out, the IBM PC, and
Right.
I trained as an engineer to fix these things. So I was working as a technician, basically as an engineer, fixing computers in the day, and I would be out at weekends photographing people for the newspaper, and that then led on to people at work saying, "Oh, Paul's interested in photography. I'm getting married. Will you photograph my wedding?"
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what though. That's quite a leap of trust, isn't it, for something like a wedding, which is, it's a one-hit wonder. You really, if you get that wrong, you're not going to go and do it again, are you? You know what I mean? It's a so you must have had that early talent for people to trust you with their big day.
Well, you haven't seen the first wedding I shot, Nick. I mean, to be fair, I didn't charge a lot to do it, but yeah, it was a baptism of fire, really, being thrown into the world of photographing someone's big day.
Mm.
But yeah, that I progressed with that, and it kind of ran as a part-time business for 10 years whilst I was working in IT. Um,
Can
and,
I
and
can
then
I
it all
ask you
changed.
then? Obviously, you're running this alongside. It's an interest. It's a hobby. You're getting paid. I would imagine, occasionally in bits and
Yeah,
whatever, and individual commissions. Was there a moment that then said, you know what, sod the IT, I'm going to go and do this full time?
there was. The problem was I was earning too much in IT to give it up. It was
Mm.
too big a risk. But what happened in IT is I'd moved from being an engineer to running the workshop. And over those 10 years, I ended up for the last few years working in product marketing. So more a kind of technical marketing role. Um, the company I worked for was moved down south. Their head office moved down south. I was still in York. They offered me the opportunity to move down south, and I turned it down. And I did it deliberately because I wanted to be a photographer. And I knew the moment I turned it down, my days were limited in
So
IT.
you actually initiated the leap, I guess, out of circumstances, but in reality, if you hadn't have done that and had stayed in York, we might never had Bailey Cooper as a full-time role potentially.
True. Yeah. I knew I had about a year before redundancy would come along, and that would give me the kick to make that leap and say, okay, I'm now going to try it as a photographer.
Excellent. It's weird,
Um,
isn't it, how sort of things line up and circumstances dictate
yeah.
what you do. But you mentioned earlier about film and dark rooms and producing your own photography in the loft, etc. In terms of print. When did the evolution and transformation go from film to digital, and how did that, particularly from a commercial photography perspective, change the game? When was that kind of timing on that, Paul?
Around about 2000. I mean, we went digital in 2000. We went fully digital with everything around about 2002. But I suppose the digital world started 98, 99-ish, but we were still shooting on film, but perhaps scanning the negatives and the transparencies and then manipulating those images in Photoshop. But the original material was still shot on film. And it wasn't till the early 2000s where we switched completely to digital capture, which changed everything.
So you were quite an early adopter, though, weren't you, of the like you say,
Yeah.
manipulating the images, Photoshop, that kind of stuff. Was that a game changer in terms of what you could produce at the time compared to what people's expectations were?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, go back to 1999, and the photo that I know you love, Nick, of the cello. That
Hang on, before anybody wonders what this is, um, I always mention a picture of a cello. Paul won an award for a picture of a cello. It's a great photograph, don't get me wrong. But when I first
oh,
met Paul in the late 90s, that cello was absolutely everywhere. So Paul Cooper and cello were just like omnipresent, really. So go on, talk us through the
so well
cello and the
that
award.
photo it was I can't talk a publicity shot for York Guildhall Orchestra,
Hmm.
and but it was kind of parts of a cello all montaged together into one image, which was done in Photoshop. So it was all shot on film, the prints were scanned, and then I did the manipulation in Photoshop. So at the time, I look back now and think, oh, I could do that so much better. But at the time, it was quite groundbreaking, and it won me Master Photographer of the Year, which, is, I think, the catalyst which then propelled my career into bigger and better things. But yeah, it all goes back to that photo of the cello.
Well, if you're going to employ a photographer, you might as well employ a master photographer. We'll explore that later. And I do want to explore AI very shortly. I'm trying to think of the evolution from film to digital and the advent of AI in the sort of 2020s. Is that a similar revolution from vinyl to CD and CD to iPod? Is that a fair comparison?
Very fair. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good analogy. And what's happening is you're now getting a lot of photography students enjoying shooting on film, a bit like they enjoy listening to vinyl. I mean, my son's stolen most of my vinyl, that's gone now. He's 30, but that's the thing now, to listen to vinyl. And I think that's happening now with photography, in that you're finding these younger people buying film and enjoying the analog qualities that it gives them.
Well, I mean, because I saw cassettes are coming back and all, so
Yeah.
it's that kind of that feeling for retro and heritage and all that kind of thing. So I guess, and we'll come on to AI shortly. I guess that photography is never going to go away, and just the method of doing it. But I would like to explore the fact that photography is obviously used everywhere in business. Is there a specialism that you need to decide on and promote that specialism and area of expertise? You talked earlier about doing weddings, but also doing people shots and doing stuff for the press. General photography versus specialist photography. What's your thoughts on that?
It's very difficult if you just try to promote yourself as a general photographer, and I think trying to specialize is definitely the way to go. And that's what we did in the going back to this issue of switching to digital in the early 2000s. We went out quite strong and said, look, we are now shooting everything digitally. Interestingly, I couldn't get my head around this. Coming from a marketing perspective in IT, into photography, photographers seem to be saying to their customers at the time, digital is cheaper, so therefore we'll charge you less. And my view on it was a bit different. So I spent several years going around lecturing other photographers saying, hang on a minute, you've had to invest thousands of pounds in new equipment and you can now offer a better service. Why are you charging less for it?
It,
It was weird.
It's interesting though. It's perception and reality, isn't it?
Mm,
Digital's sort of instant. You can see it, whatever. But like you say, the equipment, the cost, the skill in terms of manipulating those images and the Photoshop stuff and the investment in your time and energies. I always say to people, whichever industry they're in, if you're starting something new, but you've got 20 years experience of doing it elsewhere, you're charging for 20 years experience, not the fact
yeah,
that you're new to the sort of the market, as it were. You're charging for that expertise. But it's a weird concept, isn't it? Particularly, I would imagine a lot of photographer businesses are small enterprise businesses, and they don't necessarily have that confidence of
yeah.
charging for what they're worth, not charging for what their time might be perceived
Mm.
as, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. I think the 10 years I did working for another business were absolutely invaluable because they gave me a business perspective rather than just a photographer's perspective. Because so many photographers come into the photography world, like I did, because they love taking photos and they've got very little sense of how to run a business.
Yeah.
And so they undervalue themselves, they undersell themselves all the time.
Yeah.
So we went in quite hard and said, look, we are now fully digital. We can provide you with a better, faster service. So if you want your PR photographs taken this morning, you could have them at the press by lunchtime. You
Yeah.
don't have to wait for the film to be developed and printed, etc.
And there's a premium for that.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. So not are we just exploring photography and about to go into the AI model, we're exploring good business principles, Paul. So thank you for sharing
yeah,
that. It's great. But it's great to understand, isn't it, that you charge what you're worth and charge what your value is and charge what the impact you create, not just what the perceived number of hours might be. It's quicker and shorter, therefore it's cheaper. Not
yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah. So digital was a wake up call for a lot of people in the photography industry, and it cleaned a lot of people out, quite frankly, because they either spent on a lot of equipment and then charged less and basically went bust because they weren't making any money,
Mm.
or there were some people who just said, "Oh, digital, it'll never catch on. I'm going to stick with what I do."
Mm. A bit like Blockbuster saying that streaming video, yeah, oh, what
Yeah,
that's never going to work, is it? And
yeah,
we know how that worked out for them, don't we, really?
yeah, yeah. Which is why we can't ignore AI in photography. You can't just go, "Oh, it's not happening."
That's a lovely segue, by the way, because that's where we're going to go now, Paul. So thank you for that. We've explored the transition from film to digital and all that that's brought to the table at the time. But I don't know about you, AI, two letters, absolutely everywhere. It's in my, feeds, it's on my social media, everywhere you see, whatever. Everyone's got an opinion, but opinions like backsides, aren't they? Everyone's got one, but it doesn't always work properly. So what's your opinion on AI, particularly in the space that you operate very successfully in terms of image creation?
My opinion on AI as a photographer is we have to embrace it, we have to use it. It is slightly frightening, I suppose, in terms of what it can achieve without needing a photographer. But um, it's amazing how many people have iPhones and still can't take a good photo, despite all the technology that helps them do it. And I think AI is the same at the moment in that, yes, you can generate an image from it, but if you don't know what you're typing in to generate that image, then you're just going to get something rubbish out. AI, in terms of how we use it, it's really useful because it actually speeds up our editing process. So we're embracing it as much as we possibly can. It will change the landscape of photography, and I think we have to move with it because it's not going away.
But are you embracing it at the back end of the process rather than the front end of the image creation then? Is that what you're saying?
We're still using it to generate. Sorry, we generate our own images. We're using AI to make the editing process more efficient. Um, Let me give you an example. If let's see, if I was editing, in fact, I was editing a picture yesterday, and it was a scene in a village, and it was a nice, kind of postcardy looking scene, but there's a defibrillator on the wall of a building, nice brick building, and I could spend half an hour cloning that out, doing it the old-fashioned way in Photoshop.
Yeah.
But by just using AI, I could do it in a matter of seconds, and it would put back the brick pattern for me. So that's using AI to speed up what I would have done anyway,
Yeah.
I suppose.
But you see it as an asset in some cases and certainly not a threat, but it is going to change the landscape as you've mentioned then, yeah?
It is. Another example, many years ago, I was commissioned to photograph a white cup of coffee on a white background. Someone needed it urgently, a designer. Right. In fact, I think it was from a business networking lunch that you hosted.
Right,
I was
okay.
sat with someone, and this designer guy said, "I need a picture of a cup of coffee on a white background, and I need it like tomorrow." And we basically did the shot very quickly. That wouldn't happen now because that designer would go to an AI model and type in, "I want a picture of a white white cup with coffee in it on a white background," and they'd get it within a matter of seconds. And that's a very simple image to be generated by AI. However, if that same person wanted a picture of his family, he doesn't want an AI version of it.
No, I suspect not. So you reckon the people side of the industry will keep the wolf from the door when it comes to the AI
Yeah,
threat, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. And also another area, we do a lot of stock photography. So we photograph, places all around the world and then put them with a photo library, and they get sold internationally. Now, if somebody wants a photo of York Minster for a travel brochure, they want a photo of York Minster. They don't want the AI representation of York Minster.
So I
So
guess it depends on the client and their expectations and what the use of that particular image is for. I think we're a long way off photography being obsolete, and I think AI is an opportunity as well as a threat in some respects. But you've only got to look at the things like the iPod to see how quickly things can change. The iPod was the future of music, and then suddenly it wasn't. And I've got probably three of them in my drawer somewhere: iPod Nanos, iPod Minis, and all that kind of thing. Um, so, is it not to be feared by creative image creators like yourself and even videographers, for example? Does AI pose kind of like that obsolescence threat? And if so, on what sort of time scale do you think?
Um, yes, I think there will be some obsolescence, definitely. And I think we have to change the way we do things. But at the end of the day, AI is a tool that allows you to generate images, but you have to have that creative input initially to tell AI what to do. And I think creatives will be creative
Mm.
and will find a new way to be creative and embrace AI in doing so.
So it's
So
like you say, if you go into AI and say image of York Minster, you might get a AI stock version of York Minster. But if you ask a master photographer like yourself to go and photograph York Minster, you'll get it from a different angle, perspective, viewpoint, and much more creativity. So it's the creativity of the photographers and the desire of the client to have real rather than automated versions that'll keep the business going. Yeah.
yeah, it's like we say, that people buy from people. I think people engage with people and create better work when they're engaging with people as well. And I think that's where AI falls over. I mean, yes, AI will generate the picture of York Minster for you. Um, and it might not be technically accurate because it will make some bits up because AI tends to hallucinate sometimes. Um, if I go shoot a picture of York Minster, I will then use AI to remove the scaffolding.
Yeah, which is constantly outside York
Oh,
Minster.
tell me about it, Nick.
Yeah, but also you could use AI. But so AI for you is like an enhanced Photoshop kind of back end process for editing at the moment. Yeah,
At the moment, that's true, yeah. But we're also using the text versions of AI, ChatGPT and things, to help us with keywording our images for the stock library. So, whereas before I'd take an image and then myself, or I'd probably get Kate to do this because she's much better at these things than me. She would sit down and come up with 50 keywords for that image
yeah,
so that people could find it on the stock library. We're now using ChatGPT and tools like that to help speed up that keywording process. So it's in many ways, it's increased our output
yeah.
because we can get the work on the library faster.
It's certainly reduced your administrative burden, which I suspect from a creative's point of view is the least fun
Oh,
part of your job, isn't it?
absolutely, yeah, yeah. So there's much as of that. If we can offload it, that's brilliant. We're photographers. What we want to do is be out there taking photographs.
Yeah,
And the market for those photographs will change. I think the style of work that we produce will change, as everything does in the world. If we were, I mean, we're using AI for retouching, okay, and it's really good. Go back 10 years, we were using Photoshop for retouching.
yeah.
Well, go back 20 years and I would shoot a picture on film. And if it needed retouching, it would go to an artist who would get his airbrush out and literally retouch the print like that.
Wow.
So retouching, it's been going on for years and years. And I suppose when digital started, those airbrushing retouchers probably thought, oh, well, that's the end of my world.
Yeah.
The clever ones embraced Photoshop and learned how to retouch really quickly using the digital tools. And,
And
and I
then
think we've got to evolve.
they're going to embrace AI to see what the next level is,
Yeah,
isn't it? Kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, let's explore a couple of interesting and fun things about what you do. You mentioned about photographers like to be out there for photographing, but also you like to be out there networking, don't you? How important is your networking to you, and how do you now present Bailey Cooper compared to maybe how you did 10, 15 years ago to an industry and a younger audience perhaps whose expectations of images are different?
Networking is the only kind of promotion that we do, and I blame you for that, Nick, because the first networking event I ever went to was the business network that you were hosting at the time,
Yeah,
and I've been networking ever since then because do you know what? It works.
it does.
It's a slow burn. And we dropped out of networking during COVID, as many people did,
Yeah,
and then we came out the other side of COVID and thought, oh, where's all the work gone? Oh, I know, I'm not networking again. We start networking, and sure enough, it starts to happen again. And it's all about it goes back to people meeting people, talking to people, and buying off people.
yeah.
And so you've got to have a good product or a good service, but networking is absolutely essential for our business. I don't do a hard sell when I'm networking. I just go out and talk to people. And quite often, we might not even talk about business.
No,
I'll mention what I do, and then we'll have a chat, and then we'll see the same people again and again.
but you don't take a catalogue of images with you either. Or these days it wouldn't
Hmm.
be a catalogue. Obviously, it would just be on your phone and
It's on the
whatever. You
phone.
don't do that because people can find out from your website and
Yeah.
have a look at whatever. Does the does the title master photographer make a difference? And on that basis, let's explore what does that actually mean then, Paul? You are a master
Well,
photographer. What does it mean?
um, a master photographer meant that we had jumped through various hoops and passed various qualifications with the Master Photographers Association, which doesn't exist as from the 17th of December last year.
Yeah, but as
But,
it,
well,
as
no,
it,
it does exist, but it has now been amalgamated into the Royal Photographic Society, and they now have a professional division. So the terms have changed slightly, but the concept is still the same.
so
And
will you have to kind of re-go through some different hoops for the different status, or does your master photography?
mine has carried over because I spent the last 10 years actually that I was director of qualifications for the Master Photographers Association. So I was the person who was judging other people's work to see if they were up to that standard. And then we've worked closely with the Royal Photographic Society to ensure that those standards now carry over.
So the transition's smooth and
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and transparent, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
as smooth as these things ever can be.
Well, I suspect not, but I mean, so you're still a Champions League player when it comes to photography, Paul, and that's the main thing. I want to explore. We've mentioned before about some of the younger generation going back to vinyl and going back to cassettes and the likes. I know that you are particularly passionate about inspiring the next generation in photography. Do you want to share with us a little bit about what that looks like, and also, what's their view on, like you say, the AI conundrum versus digital or print or whatever? How are the younger generation embracing photography as an art form?
Okay, one of the things that the last 3 years I was involved in through the MPA was dealing with the photography apprenticeship scheme. That's, the national scheme for apprenticeships,
Yeah.
because there is a photography apprenticeship, and so I was involved as part of a steering group that decided on how it needed revamping, because quite frankly, it was stuck in the days of film and processing films and prints and things like that. So we've done a complete revamp of it, and the new scheme was launched last year, and it now is fully digital. It talks about the old technology from a historical point of view, but it's now much more exciting, and I think will appeal to a lot of young people. And I think that's a great way now for young people to get into photography. Um, the problem is there's such a lot of information out there about photography and how to get started, and it's not all accurate. But
Mhm.
I mean, that's true of any profession, isn't it,
I
really?
guess. Well,
Yeah.
particularly if it's AI generated, but let's leave that
Yeah.
one as a as
Yeah,
a,
that's a whole other conversation,
a
isn't
whole
it?
other
Yeah.
conversation. But
Yeah.
so it strikes me that you've given a lot back to the industry that served you well. Um, can I ask you, A, why you do that, and B, what's been the outcome of that? Because you're part of the mass photography stuff, you do the award um, management and
Mhm.
kind of viewing and all that kind of stuff. What can I ask you why you do that and what you get from that then, Paul?
Um, I get a sense of fulfillment from it, I suppose. I still get excited when I take a photo, and I love it when you teach somebody how to produce a better photo, and you can see that light bulb moment. Someone will come into the studio with a new camera, and they don't know how to use it at all. And by the time they leave, they understand what the dials do and which ones they can ignore, and you can almost see their eyes light up, and then they start sending you the photos that they've shot afterwards, and it's that spark that I still remember getting myself.
And are those shots enhanced by the fact that they then know how to have got those shots using like you say, the dials and the apertures
Yeah.
and the whatever the lighting settings? Is it just you see the difference in what it would have been without a bit of teaching versus what it is as a
Yeah.
result of sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, you see, the AI is built in. Let's talk about iPhones, right? Because iPhones, they're not really phones, they're cameras that you can make calls on. Because people say, oh, I haven't got a proper camera. I go, well, what have you got? Oh, well, I've got an iPhone 15 Pro Max, whatever. You go, well, that's a 1.5 grand camera that you can just make phone calls on. You know, it just
Yeah.
happens to look like a phone, that's all. But there's nothing wrong with it as a camera. I've sold photos off my iPhone lots of times. They're just good cameras.
Can I just stop you there?
Mm.
That is an absolute revelation, mate, because you'd look at it and say, Paul Cooper, Bailey Cooper Photography, I envisage that you've got a rack with your cameras, your various lenses, your big boom lenses, your microphones, all that. And they say, but I've actually sold some stuff off an iPhone. Just let's explore that, mate. How the
Yeah.
hell would that? I mean, that sounds like you've moved to the dark side.
Well, it's that switch of thinking because it is ultimately it's a camera. They've put more technology into the camera side of an iPhone than they have into the phone side. You know, it makes a phone call great. What else can you do with it? The sound quality on your phone still sounds rubbish, doesn't it? But the
Yeah,
camera's just got better and better and better. Now, yes, there are some tweaks you can do. So, for instance, I use an iPhone 15 Pro Max, and I've set it so it will shoot what are called RAW files instead of JPEGs, and that means I can then get more information out of that file. I can manipulate them more, and just get more detail. Um, and they're just good cameras. There's, nothing wrong with them as an actual photo taking device. The video world, Apple themselves, they did a video, didn't they? A promotional video using just an iPhone, and I think a whole film has been shot on one. So you need to do this mind switch and think about them as cameras, not phones. And once you do that, then I think you stop being embarrassed about using it to take photos. Now, but sorry, go on.
yeah. But what I would say there is, it doesn't mean because you've got a good camera on an iPhone that you can take a good shot, though, does it? The world's full of people who can't wait to share their travel shots and their holiday shots, and they're just bloody awful, aren't they? You still
Yeah,
need that creative eye, don't you?
yeah, and I think I probably did say earlier that that I think just because you've got an iPhone, people still can take rubbish shots. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of AI built into an iPhone, and built into a lot of cameras nowadays, so that it tries to get the best shot for you. So it's doing a lot of processing in the background.
Yeah,
People don't think of it as AI, but it is.
yeah.
Um, and I think people then get frustrated because the AI will get them a result 95% of the time, but there's that 5% when it just doesn't quite get it right. And that's where when you can teach them, so going back to, why do I like giving back to people? When you teach somebody how to take control of the phone or the camera so that they are in charge. And that 5%, suddenly they go, oh, well, I know why it's got it wrong. It's because it's a picture of snow. Everything's really white. And the camera's gone, oh, I'm going to make it darker. But I can override that now because I know how to do that. And then they get that light bulb moment, and suddenly they're in control.
Yeah.
And they're still using the AI, but they're in control of it.
But they're suddenly pursuing their interest to a much higher level, aren't they? Really,
Yeah.
you've turned them from amateur to semi-pro, haven't you? At that
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple of
And the,
final
the
questions
barrier,
for you, Paul.
sorry.
Just a couple of
Yeah.
final questions. One is, what's the weirdest kind of or strangest commission or request you've had, or just something that you filmed yourself just off the top of your head that you thought, well, that's a bit apart from your cello, which is a bit, what's the strangest thing that you've photographed and that you're proud of?
Oh, that I'm proud of. I'm very proud of the cello still, to be
I would
fair.
be. Can
Very
I just
proud of
stop
the
the
cello.
audience there as well? To stop you so I can let the audience know. One of the things that Paul did in the very early days of digital, he took a photograph of the bay at Scarborough on the northeast coast of England, for those who are listening elsewhere. And it was on a very high watermark day. The waves were crashing over the fence, etc. It was all shot in black and white, and there was a life belt, the traditional sort of round red and white life belt. And the only thing of colour on that picture was this red and white life belt, stood out against a really grey sky, a really grey sea, massive waves with the white of the sort of waves breaking over the what, and I just thought to myself, that is a stunning image, and it was just that little piece of color within the dark background. So that's not strange. It's just something to be proud of. I've always loved, the photography,
Yeah, I know
photography
the one you
me.
mean. Yeah, yeah.
I've
You see, I
always
look at
loved
that.
that photograph. Yeah. But
Yeah.
what
So
about weird? What about
sorry.
weird stuff? What about strange stuff?
Strange stuff. Okay, the strangest one we probably did was, do you remember MFI?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they've gone now, haven't they? But we were once commissioned to go into the MFI store to photograph a brick wall, right?
Right.
Just a small section of a brick wall that they then wanted to blow up and use to put on a wall.
So they wanted to put a photograph of a brick wall.
On a wall.
Well, MFI were always slightly weird in terms of their
They were.
design.
It was, it was one of those phone calls I got, and I thought, this is a wind up. And it wasn't. But anyway, and just well, we were once we photographed oh, it was a medical thing. These pigs, well, no, they grow them from pig cells
Yeah.
and make like this fake skin that is then used in operations and things. And we had to, that was a bit weird as well. Yeah.
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 I've got a client who works in the medical device sector, and I once phoned him. He said, I can't talk. I'm in the theatre. And I thought he was at the theatre. I
At the
said, well,
theatre.
I said, what are you watching? He said, I'm watching one of our devices being used on a medical cadaver. I was like, oh, geez, so, and someone was probably videoing and filming that at the time as well. So, and taking photographs of that. So, yeah, that's slightly
Yeah.
strange. You've got to have a stomach for that, haven't you, really?
Oh, let me just tell you one more very quickly, right? The Smith and Nephew Research Centre that was in York,
Yeah.
they used to teach surgeons how to do knee operations and things like that. And they had an open evening at this event. So I went to photograph this event, and there's lots of people around, eating canapes, drinking wine, etc., and having tours of the building. And I'm wandering around with my camera, and we wandered into this. Well, it was a freezer, and then I suddenly realized there was rack upon rack of knees, proper, real human knees in this freezer.
Wow.
There's people walking around just having an evening's entertainment. It was weird.
Yeah, I once went to a networking event at the Thackeray Medical Museum in Leeds, and you're eating your lunch in a room that's got sort of jars of all sorts of this. Like, oh, you got to have a stomach for that one as well. So, last thing I want to explore, Paul. It's great that we've sort of explored the transition from film to digital, digital through Photoshop, Photoshop through to AI, etc. And it seems to me that you're definitely carrying the torch for photography, but embracing AI in the right way. So, what's next for you while you're out and about in the networking circuit? What you're looking for? How's the future look for Paul Cooper and Bailey Cooper in a world that continually changes?
For us, it is we are moving into doing more training, photographic training. So we've always done the training, but I think it's becoming a bigger part now. And interestingly, it's driven by AI because people are sometimes frustrated because they can't get the results from their phones, etc., and they want to learn how to take control of things. So we've definitely moved into that in that direction to the extent that we've got a dedicated website now called masteryour.photography,
Okay.
which is our training offering, and we're going to be putting some online courses on there. And of course, we do the one-to-one as well, and people can sign up on that website. And if they give us their email address, they will get one email a week from me, which will give them a photographic tip. And they'll get that for a whole year, 52 tips.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll put those details in the show notes for those who are sort of watching it or absorbing it through the power of whichever platform they're on. So I'm just going to share with the audience who are watching some of the information about the podcast itself, and then what we'll do is we'll go into the sort of the final thank yous, etc. So the first thing is, for those who are watching or listening, obviously you're aware that this is available on YouTube, but this podcast series comes out every Tuesday morning. It comes out on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Podbean, Castbox, whatever you've got. So if you just search for the Impact Sessions with Nick Bramley, if you can like and subscribe, if you subscribe, you'll get your automatic updates every Tuesday morning. We try and have some interesting guests, and of course, and Paul. So thank you, Paul. Paul's details are on the screen for those who are watching on YouTube. I'll put them in the show notes for those people who are just absorbing it through a normal platform of a podcast platform. But all that remains really, Paul, is to say thank you so much. It's been really interesting. Great to see you again. And it's good to see that a business that potentially could be at threat by technology is actually aware of, if you embrace it right, what it's going to do for you. So, great to see, and long may it continue. Thanks for your time, Paul.
Thank you.